Hello and welcome to the Moss Rods channel. I finally managed to finish up my Revell 57 Ford Del Rio wagon and wanted to talk you all through the process, some of the hurdles I had, some of the changes, and just overall how we got to this final point. If you've been following along with this build, you may remember that I was building this specifically for the NNL North Show over in Minneapolis, Minnesota back in May. They had a theme this year called 57 Heaven, which included cars that were built in the year 1957. Now, this Ford had been a build I wanted to do for a while, but knew it was going to be pretty similar to the 57 or 56 Chevy I built last year, so wanted to space it out. And I also figured it would be a good fit because a lot of people would probably have done 57 Chevys, which they did, and I wanted something that would stand out a little bit on the table. So that's how we ended up with this. It was a pretty straightforward build, nothing too crazy. Surprisingly, no body modifications, which is rare for me. But it did have a custom chassis that I built up that was notched in the rear with a 4-link air suspension. And then the front has air suspension as well to kind of get it as low as possible to the point where it was laying frame. Now that caused one of the issues I realized with this kit. Actually, not with the kit, with the build, which is an issue I've dealt with on real cars before, is I tend to forget that frames on cars of this era protruded below the body. So I was working on getting the chassis to lay frame, but then when I put the body on, I realized that the body was still sitting quite a bit off the ground. And this is an issue I had with my 53 Ford Custom line, my real car that I used to own, where it would lay frame, but it still looked pretty tall when it was aired out. So I solved this the same way that it was solved on my 53 Ford, by adding some lake pipes. I originally wanted to go with bellflowers out the back, which, if you're not aware, think of a lake pipe, but instead of coming out right behind the front wheel well, comes out the rear wheel well and goes out back towards the bumper. I really love bellflowers, but ended up going with the lake pipes for the reason I mentioned. Now, one of the main problems I had with this build is the patina. Now, I've done a lot of patina to the point where I'm realizing yellow is a very difficult color to work with. And that is obviously because, well, not obviously, but probably because yellow is part of the same family of colors as orange and brown, which is what rusting is. So it ends up being very difficult to weather in a way that looks natural, looks blended but not too blended, all this nonsense. So this is actually the third attempt that you're looking at on this car, after the first two just did not look great at all. And we're coming around to the passenger side. There's still a few issues with this, which I don't like. I think I went a little too heavy on the passenger door, just around the door sills. Looks a little heavy to me, looks a little unnatural. I did make a couple changes from my initial build plan. I don't remember if I mentioned this in the first video, but from the beginning I had imagined this sitting on black wheels. I also was not sure on color. I went through, I think, 3 different colors. I was either going to do green and white, which I've done too much, pink and white, which would have been interesting, black and white, which would have been interesting, or yellow and white, which ended up being the winner. But I was originally planning on, I think I had originally planned on doing black and white from the beginning, with black wheels, and then the pink came into mind, then the yellow came into mind, and, it just became a journey of trying to figure out what I wanted this to look like. Now, when I had shifted over to the yellow and white due to some recommendations from friends and other people, I was still leaning towards the black wheels, but I think that would have just caused a different vibe than I wanted. So I looked around in my part stash and I found these wheels and tires from the AMT 36 Ford Coupe, the 3-window coupe. And I think they look great. I don't always go with chrome wheels. I don't like chrome in general. As you can probably see, I repainted all the chrome on the car to dull it. But They work pretty well on this. I'm actually quite happy with it, especially with a little bit of a black wash to make them look a little less toy-like. I think they fit the build perfectly. It helps give it that California cruiser look. Now, I had also mentioned the lake pipes, a change that I had made. So when I had finished this I did finish this for N&L, but it was not complete. I got to the point where I was happy enough to set it on the table, but I still needed to do some work when I got home from the show. And one of the things that I was not happy with how it was sitting on the table were the lake pipes. The initial lake pipes I had installed on this car were too short. They were ending about halfway between the door and the wheel well, so they're ending right about where that second outlet is. And that just looked too short to me. So I ended up printing these longer lake pipes and adding caps to them. Now, the original file for these lake pipes came with a blank cap, but I modified them to have a Moon Eyes logo based on actual lake pipe caps that you can get, because the yellow and white with the chrome wheels definitely gives it a Moon Eyes vibe. So I think that's a nice little detail to kind of, again, continue that California look. Now, another change that had happened from the original plan would be the roof. I had really wanted to add a roof rack with a canoe on this because I wanted to have this a bit of a Minnesota vibe, given that the show is in Minnesota. But I just was not feeling the roof rack with the canoe. I also couldn't get a good canoe that I liked, so I talked this over with my mom over dinner one night, and she recommended water skis, which, again, I kind of like. This is not the first time that she's made a very smart decision change on one of my builds, so I should probably listen to her a bit more. But yeah, I really like the water skis, so it does kind of work. It could still give it a Minnesota vibe, because, Minnesota has a lot of lakes, with water skiing being very popular, but I did end up leaning back towards the California look. As it comes around, you'll notice that it does have California plates on it. I'll have to refocus because my camera does not like focusing on apparently anything right now, but it doesn't like being able to focus on the side and the front and back at the same time. Is that clear? Might be able to make out the fact that the plates say mellow, but you'll be able to see it better in the final photos here at the end of the video. But yeah, so I went back into my old roots and made it California. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the build. So we'll go ahead and get underneath the hood real quick. So one of the little details on this build, which I love adding stories to my cars. I like having little details that hint towards the car's past. And a car like this, typically you would find, sitting out on a farm, garage, who knows where. And then person who's building it decides to leave the body all natural and then do all the custom work, redo the interior, add the suspension, notch the chassis, all that kind of stuff. And in my mind, the person who built this also decided to add the Latham afterwards. So I created a little hint to the car's previous life of having a little backfire mark on the inside of the hood to show that this car would have not had the Latham originally and had some issues with a small backfire back in its day. But yeah, other than that, the engine bay is pretty much stock. And I really did wish I could add some more detail in here. I regret not adding any plug wires. I really wanted to add a wire distributor to this, but I didn't have the time before the show. And by the time I got back from the show, the car was already glued together, and I did not want to glue it or take it apart just to add plug wires. At some point, I might add some fuel lines, because it does look a little bland, and I think it could benefit from a little bit of detail on the firewall and adding some fuel lines for the carburetors. But it does have a battery with some wires on it, which comes with the kit. And yeah, so pretty simple underneath the hood, but the Latham is there to get your attention and make it look a little unique. Because, no, I like engines. The engine's probably the most important part, one of the most important parts of a build for me. This hood can be a pain. You have to kind of pull it forward to have it sit flush. But yeah, so I like having something unique to the engines on my builds, just because of how important the engine is on a custom car. That's why I don't really end up building many, if any, curbsides or anything like that. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for this build. Pretty happy with how it came out. Of course, a few changes I would do if I were to do it again, but I won't. But time to move on to the next build. As if you've been following, you'll know that it's the... I'm still working on the Bronco. I'm working on a Mustang. And we'll also be starting a Porsche for the Porsche group build here very soon. And yeah, so that's what's going to be occupying my time for the next few months or however long those builds take. Also, if you're watching this on the upload date, which would be Friday if I get it out on time, then tomorrow is going to be the Silicon Valley IPMS show, which I'll be heading down to. So that'll be fun. I'll probably be bringing this with a couple other builds. And yeah, so that's pretty much it from me. I'm going to leave you guys with some beauty photos of the car. And I hope you all enjoy, and I hope I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.